but we don't even meet those, and we still pay for Ukraine like it's a duty or something like that. Very, very odd. Here is National Post, and it says Intel watchdog cancels CSIS review because of lack of legal protection for staff. The article talks a lot about not having enough money, but the headline is all about the legal protection not being sufficient for them to actually dig too much into this, and they've already found concerning things. The decision to cancel the review was not taken lightly because the watchdog had already found issues of concern within CSIS, or with CSIS partnership. Canada's largest. So yeah, the article's not very good, and I didn't get to the part where it was talking about the situation with the legal protection for staff. It was all talking about the cost, and there's a 15% cut in this little office, and in they're supposed to oversee all of these other offices that got all of these extra billions of dollars and all of this extra money flying around, and the office that oversees all this is being cut by 15% in the budget cuts, and they can't actually do the job that they're being asked to do because of the budget constraints. And that's all by design, I think, right? And so I'm sorry that I didn't get to the part of the article that talks about the legal constraints, but I think that that's enough. Like, we don't want to start this investigation very much because the staff aren't protected from any kind of legal backlash. And so if they acted improperly, we don't want them to go to jail. So weird, right? Like, why are staff working in a situation where they may need legal protection to look over what they've done? I'm sure, I have a lot of confidence, like 99.9% if something came up, I would be shit shocked. But I'm sure you could look at my professional life over the last 20 years and I had nothing. Nope. So government officials shouldn't be worried about contravening the law if they're doing their job, right? Like, I never do. So never contravene the law in the execution of my job, right? And so, and if I was worried, if my boss said, you need to do this, I'd be like, I don't think so. I would say something, right? So anyway, regardless, Ryan is responding to this, Globe and Mail. Canada provides $50 million to buy drones and drone parts for Ukraine. And Ryan says, anyone getting tired of this yet? $2 million a month using food bank, or $2 million a month using food banks. Countless Canadians living in tents, record amount of children suffering food insecurity, and our government is spending $50 million to buy Ukraine drones. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, because why are we spending so much money on a foreign country's ability to make war? Holly Doan says, access to information. Cabinet advisor Amira Al-Gawabi secretly paid $80,000 for pro-Palestine research to York University to counter alleged disinformation by MPs, senators, and media. Office of Special Representative on Combating Islamophobia had flatly denied funding at taxpayers' expense. So she lied, and now she was caught by Blacklock's reporter. And do you know what will happen? What used to happen is people were held accountable. There used to be some kind of, people would come back and say, hey, you can't do this, and the office would be under scrutiny, and somebody would come in and they'd be very serious and they say, we can't have this, and then she would be fired or something like that. But nobody's going to do a damn thing, and that's crazy. She could just lie about spending $80,000 on pro-Palestinian research at York University and get away with it scot-free. Yes, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Hope I'm wrong, but I'm not. I'm going to read another report in a year saying she did it again, but this time with $160,000 instead of $80,000. The Reclaimer says the top 20 cash reserves of First Nation bands in Canada is $718 million and change, almost $719 million. So all of the bands are getting all of this money. And then the Reclaimer says, I should have said this, I've got more financial statements to go through. So this is the top 20 bands so far. Not quite, it's not exactly right. But this is a shit ton of money. Again, the other day I said I watched the Beverly Hillbillies growing up, and my dad thought Mr. Drysdale was hilarious, and I thought he's clearly taking advantage of these country bumpkins. And I guess that was the joke, but like, why are you on the side of the bankers, guy? But anyway, the whole point was that the people weren't sophisticated enough. The Beverly Hillbillies weren't sophisticated enough to understand the scam being done by Mr. Drysdale, and they had to tolerate them because the Beverly Hillbillies had money, and Mr. Drysdale wanted their money in his bank or whatever, just wanted the money. And so that was happening. And I feel like there are elements of that at play here. You've got chiefs who are running lots of money. You've got other people who are maybe helping them, who are investing the money, who are, their go-to guy. And maybe all of this money should be doing more to help this community that we're paying all this tax money to help, rather than, I don't know, enriching the banks that it's sitting in. It's weird. It's a weird situation. So that's lots of money. And it seems like with all that money, I'd buy clean water. I don't know. That's one, like top of my list. I'm just saying. I would maybe buy a nicer house. I would paint the place that I had, right? Like if your band has all this money and you're living in squalor, you might want to take that up with your chief. You might want to take that up with your leadership. You might want to take that up with somebody. And far be it from me to tell you how to live, but that's a lot of money, and I'm paying for it. So you want to check in on that? Like, holy cow. Holly Doan says, new $20 banknote will include unprecedented security features to combat counterfeiting, says Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem. How do we stop members of parliament printing money and then sending it to Ukraine? Is there a foil hologram thing we can put on the money printer that will prevent them from doing that? Because right now it seems like, oh yeah, $20 counterfeited, you're going to jail. Oh, $100 billion sent to Ukraine, you're a hero or something. All those dead kids and Boris Johnson saying, oh yeah, well, just hold out longer. You'll definitely defeat Russia sometime soon. We promise. Bullshit, right? And so like, it's great that they want to secure the money, but can we actually secure the money where it matters and where it's all being jettisoned out of the country at the level of the money printer and the government printing, right? Because the holograms and stuff, it says features that shift when the note is moved. Super cool. Oh man, I can't wait for our non-monopoly looking money and stuff. It's bullshit, right? It's just going to become a card. It's just going to morph into a card, and that's that. And they're going to say, oh, here's your new money card, and just load it up, and it'll have all the credit money that you need. Anyway, unprecedented security features to combat counterfeiting. If they're not actually doing something about the people in government who are stealing our tax dollars and shoveling it off to foreign countries for war, then they're not actually serious about securing the money. Rupert Lowe, who's an MP in England, says reports of significant benefit fraud from migrants. I have the answer. Hold on, everyone. We're about to get banned from YouTube. Ban foreigners from claiming benefits. Right? Yes, this is the answer. Yes, it is. And people want it to be a controversial thing to say, and it's not. It is common sense. Andy Lee says the Israeli embassy is correct. I uncovered that Islamic Relief Canada funnels taxpayer money to the Canadian Muslim vote. Islamic Relief worldwide has been broadly linked to terrorist activities. The Israelis were well within their right to deny the delegation entry. Okay, this is a little bit later in the show, so this should be at the end here. But there was a Canadian delegation of people who went to the West Bank, and they were denied entry. And this is supposed to be a big deal, but again, these people are claiming victimhood. I think it's not what it's being made out to be in the press is not actually what happened. I don't think it's being accurately reported. Rupert Lowe again. Let's talk about the invasion of England, the ongoing invasion of the West. It's important to talk about. And so Rupert Lowe says, rather depressed by the lack of any desire in Parliament to face up to Islamism, with our population changing how it is, this is going to get worse and worse. This is sadly an undeniable fact. And so, yeah, nobody wants to do anything. Yesterday, Rupert put forward a parliamentary motion, and he was talking about actually doing something about all of this at the actual source or root cause, which is mass migration. It's not any of the other things that we've been forced to talk about over the last couple of days. It's mass migration that's causing these issues, and he's tried to do something about it, and nobody's done anything to help him. And so I'm not surprised, but it is demoralizing. Here is Jack, and he says, Bondi showed how quickly Australians are blamed instead of told the truth. Share this. Here he's talking about, it's a little bit long, so we're not going to listen to it. But here he's talking about how politicians, well, I'll play the first minute, I guess. He's asking about why politicians will always go and take away people's speech rights or take away people's gun rights, but they don't want to talk about mass migration. They don't want to talk about the actual problem. They want to talk about a politicization of the problem in order to further their agenda and remove rights from the citizens, all for your safety, comrade. And he's right, and it's just a little wordy. Here we go.
Question right now. Why is it that every time something horrific happens, our leaders rush to talk about what was used, but never who used it? The Prime Minister and Premiers have shown us exactly who they are. They're cowards. They're happy to attack law-abiding Australians, happy to punish people who follow the rules, happy to blame everyday citizens for the actions of criminals and terrorists. But when it comes to the real problem, when it comes to saying who is responsible, where is the threat coming from, or why it keeps happening, they go silent. Why? Because they're scared. Scared of extremists, scared of backlash, scared of telling the truth. So instead, they take the easy road. They attack us. And here's the part people really need to think about. What do the terrorists actually want? They want a weaker society. They want fewer Australians willing to stand up. They want people disarmed, physically, culturally, and mentally. And every time our leaders lie, deflect, and manipulate the narrative, they're doing that job for them. Australians are being lied to.
Yes. And he carries on and laying out kind of what I did too. So there you go. Here is Frances Widdowson, and she says, the trans activists feel unsafe when I say that there are only two sexes. That's my claim with respect to the trans issue. And because it makes Mary Lee Mulholland upset, I can't be reinstated at the university that she used to work at. And Born to Be Alive says, the trans queer movement is promoted by Marxists who typically undermine society by supporting a suppressed class who seek power, just as they are doing with the natives. Yes. And so it is quite interesting to see this whole the trans movement is a similar wedge being used in a similar way. This underclass being promoted and championed and so on and so forth. And it doesn't matter that this class of people were magicked up out of socialist Marxism. It doesn't matter that. Like, that's secondary, third, fourth, fifth. It doesn't matter. It's so far down the list. It doesn't matter. We have to contend with these people. They're in positions of power. Scary. Anita Anand is talking about the West Bank thing, and she says, today a private delegation of Canadians, which included members of parliament, was denied entry into the West Bank at an Israeli border crossing. Global Affairs is in contact with the delegation, and we have expressed Canada's objections regarding the mistreatment of these Canadians while attempting to cross. Mark Norman says this was either a stunt or poor planning. I suspect the organizers knew exactly what they were doing. Accessing the West Bank via Jordan is both stupid and irresponsible. Israel has every right to put conditions on and deny entry into their territory. Don't be sucked into a false narrative on the issue. Everybody's spinning false narratives. And if you try and cut through the false narratives and get to the root of something, for example, like the Israeli thing, how did Israel come to control Israel, that is Israel now? That started in 1948 with the Balfour Declaration. Or if you want to go further back, 1917, when after 1917 and England took over part of the peninsula of that area, and then they handed that over to the Israelis in 1948 via the Balfour Declaration. And talking about that, nobody ever talks about that with regards to land rights discussions. And people get not mad, but people don't want that part of the conversation, because if those issues aren't addressed, then the main issue is not being addressed. And so no negotiations will ever work, right? And so we're never allowed to discuss the main issues, and in that way we're prevented from actually finding a proper resolution, because it won't ever include everything that's necessary for a proper resolution, if that makes sense. Anyway, regardless, we're being played over and over and over again. Frances Widdowson says, again, this is a story from Minding Ottawa today. Where are the active progress reports? But this is in the wrong spot. Apologies about this. This should be down here. That's not right. Here is Mario. 6 Canadian MPs, 5 Liberals, 1 NDP were denied entry into the West Bank just days after a terrorist attack in a country that rewarded Hamas. I wonder why they were denied. Well, there is actually a reason. They refused to sign a form. So here's the table salt. She says, just a minor clarification from CBC after the fact. Our MPs did not refuse to sign a form. They were, in fact, linked to a terror group and asked to sign that they understood this. Minor detail, yeah? So the clarification says, in an earlier version of the story, the National Council of Canadian Muslims said the Canadian MPs were denied entry at the border after they declined to sign a form saying they were public safety risks. In fact, the form simply states that the reason for denial is public security or public safety or public order considerations, and asks that the person seeking entry acknowledge with a signature that the decision was delivered to them. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what, like, if somebody said you're a terrorist threat, I would understand what that means. But if you say the form provides an area, in fact, the form simply states that the reason for the denial is public security, public safety, or public order considerations. That wouldn't apply. Like, what do you mean? That doesn't really mean anything, right? And so it's kind of very blob-like, and asks that the person seeking entry acknowledge with a signature that the decision was delivered to them. What decision? That they were a public safety risk, and they need to acknowledge they're a public safety risk. So it's muddy. It's not something that's very clear, if you ask me. So Leah says, posting this here since Mark Collette is still banned on Twitter. And Mark Collette says, a handful of Jews get killed in Bondi Beach, Australia. And immediately we have outpourings of support, international grief, and of course calls to change both speech laws and firearm legislation already happening in Australia and speech laws happening in Ontario, Canada. Write me out too. So he says, here's the juxtaposition, right? Hold that in your head while I tell you about other things that happen. Who else has been attacked and nobody gets up in arms about it? Hundreds of thousands of white women and girls are attacked, sexually abused, raped, and murdered by migrants all over the Western world. And the reasonable suggestion that we end immigration is met with cries of racist and completely shot down as politicians reaffirm their commitment to open borders. If the influencers that you follow haven't woken up to who wields disproportionate power in the West, maybe it's because they've been on an all expenses paid trip to Israel. How many influencers, Kevin Vung, Ben Mulrooney, Harrison Faulkner, have been to Israel recently? Those are three. All three of them recently been to Israel. All three of them simping hard for Israel. And so isn't that weird? Isn't that something like that's pretty strange, right? So I do my best to not do that. I hope I'm not doing that. That's not my point. I want Canada first. I don't have any ill will against other countries. You are another country and you have a right to run yourself whichever way you see fit. I wish we could run Canada whichever way we see fit, but we can't. We are an occupied state, unfortunately. But I don't wish occupation on other countries. I don't want other countries to do what I want them to do. I just want them to leave us the F alone so we can do whatever we want to do. Right? See what I'm saying? So it's very, very, the whole Western governments are controlled by some other government, and you can't even talk about who it might be. Who knows, though, right? I have no idea. So that's weird. That's a weird place to be. And then later in the show, I have Trump simping to, what's her name? Sheldon Adelson's wife, who gave him $250 million. And I had seen memes of, I have to say goodbye to the stream, so that's why I'm wrapping up a little bit here. I'd seen memes of the first woman president, and it was this woman that I didn't recognize, and I was like, well, I don't get this joke. And until I saw him introduce Sheldon Adelson's wife, and I was like, I get the joke. Now I understand who this first female president is. It's the woman who gave Trump $250 million. And so it's interesting that it's not just Dallas Brody. It's not just our entire MPs, all of them. It's not just Danielle Smith. It's Donald Trump too. They're all Israel first. And I don't understand. I just want somebody who says, we should put Canada first. We should stop and say, this is not best for Israel, but it's best for Canada, so we're going to do it. We should. This is me talking about this on the live stream, absolutely going to decimate my YouTube thing. I don't even care, but I just wanted to mention it. Oh, I have to tell you about this. Hold on. Before we say goodbye to the stream, I have to tell you about this. Finance a lot. It's important, and we've got time. Okay, we'll just go through this. Sean Fraser says, or Blacklock's reporter says, what's the long and the short of this story is that this bill is going nowhere of C9. Hear why Blacklock's editor Tom Korski and AM 640 host Alex Pearson think that, and they're responding to themselves. Sean Fraser is reaching out to faith leaders over proposals to extend hate speech laws to reading of religious texts, an amendment prompted by 2023 Muslim Death to Jews rally. So they're reaching out to religious leaders to see if they can move forward with C9. And they're saying that's effectively killed the bill, and I don't think that that's true. And Finance a Lot says X just updated its privacy policy, stating it will adhere to EU and UK demands to remove content. It also warns users you're responsible for the content you post or create. Of course, you're responsible for the content you post or create. So yesterday I was talking to Amazing Polly. Overnight, I got this email. And it says, hi, Canada Polly, your post was reported and had its visibility limited for violating the X rules. Specifically, we've determined your post violated our rules against hateful conduct. You may not promote violence against, threaten, or harass other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or serious disease. And the context is I was talking to Amazing Polly about the reports coming out after the Bondi Beach thing. And I was surprised that there weren't more Canadian calls for remigration in the mainstream. And she said there's tons of them. And I said I hadn't seen any. And so I said, if they print that, so she was responding to me about something, talking about how Jews are in control of all media. Like Amazing Polly said, Jews are in control of all media. And I said, if they print that, they'll lose all funding, but Jews control the media. She was paraphrasing. And I said, but you already know that. I haven't seen any Canadian articles talking about deporting anyone. I'm surprised there aren't articles using this to justify an increase to Muslim migration into Canada. So is what I said that's hateful is that Jews control the media? Is that the hateful thing that I said? Or is it my surprise that they're not using a justification as justification to bring more Muslims in? What's the hateful thing? Or is it just because I said Muslims and Jews? So I canceled my X subscription. I told Grok where to go because it's ridiculous. You have a premium subscription thing and you're supposed to have premium support, and it's manned by Grok. It's not manned by humans, and it never has been manned by humans ever. Before Grok was a thing, nobody answered. Nobody answered you. It just sat there and nobody ever answered you. It's a grift. I'm done paying to be censored. F this platform. Honestly, the only reason I'll use it is just to display what's going on. With that, we've got to say goodbye to the stream, but I have an update about my interview with John Carpe. Not that I spoke to John Carpe or anything like that, and I'm not even trying to cast shade at John Carpe, but Justice Center released this stream of tweets, and I was right. And John Carpe was incorrect. I was saying that the education system is a place where parents have almost been frozen out, and they have no ability to hold the people who have taken the education system hostage to account. And he was basically saying, like, you have to try. And I was like, I have a bunch, and it failed. And there's no possible way for me to make more inroads now. You know what I'm saying? And that was exactly right. And he was mad at me for it. Or he seemed like he was mad at me. I don't know if he was actually mad at me. Anyway, with that, thanks for watching, everybody. And if you want the whole show, head over to Canada.